Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of President Trump as he signs various executive orders. Before we get started with this, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I want to make sure you know that the goal of this is not to be political. The goal is to be neutral and just to provide commentary based on the body language that I am observing. Last thing before we get started is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go.
Sir, we have a presidential memorandum encouraging departments and agencies in your government, including the Department of the Interior, to promote federal recognition of the Lumby tribe of North Carolina.
I love the Lumby tribe.
So when he said, I love the Lumby tribe, watch his hands right here.
The Lumby tribe of North Carolina.
I love the Lumby.
So as he says, I love the Lumby tribe. Now, this is pretty consistent with how he tends to emphasize, but he's leaving his body very open. So when he talks about this, as he's saying this, I do believe he actually feels that. He does like the Lumby tribe. He's not just saying this for political reasons. It seems like that's something he actually feels based on this body language right here.
Lumby tribe. So this is the first big step, right?
This would be a huge step for them, sir.
Yeah, they were with me all the way. They were great. North Carolina, Lumby tribe.
Now, I want you to watch this right here. Watch how he turns his head along with the executive order.
Okay.
Now, it's likely that he's expecting people to take pictures, for there to be still shots of him doing this, but he truly wants his face to be in line with how he's holding the executive order. I think that there's genuine pride in what he's doing right here. So I think that he really enjoys doing this with the executive orders. He really genuinely wants to be associated with all of the things that he's signing. So this is something that I think connects to him and is probably very important to him. Now, we're going to get into some more subtle body language as we keep going, maybe some more interesting body language, but I do want you to understand what you're seeing as you see him sign all these various executive orders.
A set of pardons for peaceful pro-life protesters who were prosecuted by the Biden administration for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Do you know how many?
I believe it's 23, sir.
23 people were prosecuted. They should not have been prosecuted.
All right, so you saw him shaking his head. They should not have been prosecuted. I genuinely think that based on that, it shows that he's emotionally connected to what he's talking about. He feels that he really genuinely does not believe these are people that should have been prosecuted. Watch this again.
Were prosecuted. They should not have been prosecuted. Many of them are elderly people.
Now, it may seem obvious as I'm talking about head nods and head shakes and things like that, that of course somebody's going to shake their head or nod their head when they feel a certain way, but you'd be surprised. There are often times when people feel one way and say something else. So someone will say that they didn't do something and they'll shake their head yes if they actually did, that type of thing. So there is meaning in the fact that his head shakes and head nods are consistent with what he is saying.
They should not have been prosecuted. This is a great honor to sign this. They'll be very happy. So they're all in prison now?
Some are out of custody.
Now you see this right here, the way he's pursing his lips. We do this when we disapprove of something. So you see the head shake. He's also pursing his lips in a way that shows he does not approve of these people being incarcerated. And he genuinely seems to feel that too.
Happy. So they're all in prison now?
Some are out of custody.
It's ridiculous. Okay?
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years.
Now you see his eyebrows went up. Now I talked about in other videos when President Trump does that, he's bringing attention to his face because we all do that when we raise our eyebrows. But it can also be surprise. I think that his eyebrows going up right there in this context suggests that he believes people will feel surprised, either surprised that he's signing it or surprised at the content. That much I can't say, but I do think that he's doing that in response to how he thinks people will react to this. Watch his eyebrows again right here.
A big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. President, Mr. President, a U.S. judge temporarily blocks the birthright citizenship.
Now, it's interesting. As he's being asked questions, watch how his hands change right here.
Okay, thank you very
Mr.
much.
Mr. President, a U.S. judge.
You notice he changed his hands from being interlocked to one hand on top of the other. And that's seemed to be intentional on his part, because when we cross our hands like that, that can make us appear more closed off. And so putting your hand one on top of the other makes us seem more approachable, more like we're willing to answer questions. So it was interesting that he almost caught himself and changed his body language right there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. President, a U.S. judge temporarily blocks the birthright citizenship order. Do you have any reaction?
No, obviously we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge.
Now, that was probably true. Watch his shoulders right here.
Mr. President, a U.S. judge temporarily blocks the birthright citizenship order. Do you have any reaction?
No,
All right, when he said no, he raised both shoulders. Now, we tend to raise one shoulder when we're not really committed to something. If we don't really feel it and we want to give the impression that we don't know or don't care or something like that, we might do one shoulder. But as he did both, as they ask if it affects him or if his reaction to that, when he raises both shoulders and responds, you can assume that what he's saying is probably the truth. That's probably consistent with how he feels.
Will force President Putin to negotiate?
I don't know, but I think he should make a deal.
Mr. President, does it bother you that Elon Musk criticized a deal that you made publicly, that he said that he tweeted that?
No, it doesn't. He hates one of the people.
So a journalist had just asked whether or not he's bothered by the fact that Elon Musk has said something critical. So what we would look for after something like this to see if it does in fact bother him are changes in body language, shifts, arm crossing, that sort of thing, or ways to pacify himself. So that's what I'm looking for right now. Now, I haven't seen anything yet. Let's go back and continue to watch that again. See if there's anything there that would suggest that he in fact is bothered by Elon Musk disagreeing with him.
I think he should make a deal.
Mr. President, does it bother you that Elon Musk criticized a deal that you made publicly, that he said that he tweeted that?
No, it doesn't. He hates one of the people in the deal.
Have you spoken to him since then?
No, I've spoken to Elon, but
So you saw the eyebrows raised. So as he's talking, he wants you to pay attention to what he's saying. But we're not seeing anything where he's trying to pacify himself. We're not seeing shifts in body language, not seeing him cross his arms, close off, or anything like that. So what he's saying is likely accurate. That's likely how he actually feels about this.
I've spoken to all of them, actually. No, the people in the deal are very, very smart people. But Elon, one of the people he happens to hate, but I have certain hatreds of people too.
So at this point, you may have seen him looking around some and may wonder if there's any meaning to that. Now, where we look, like the direction we look, that type of thing, I've heard people talk about that having meaning. I do not believe it actually does. But what does matter is the intensity of somebody's stare. If somebody stares at you, doesn't move at all, doesn't blink, doesn't look around, that has implications, as does if somebody's gaze changes, if they're starting to look around more or not meeting you in the eye anymore, and they were before. At this point, his rhythm and cadence with that has been pretty normal. I haven't really noticed any major changes in it, so I don't think there's any meaning there.
Mr. President, you said that you wanted to make Dr. King's dream a reality. What's your response to his children and civil rights leaders who say that your DEI orders are a contradiction of his dream and could further drive racial?
Well, I haven't heard that.
Mr. President, you put the Houthis back.
So obviously, that was a question that he was not interested in elaborating on. Watch his body language right here.
To say that your DEI orders are a contradiction of his dream and could further drive racial.
Well, I haven't heard that.
So he shook his head no. He said, I haven't heard that. Maybe he hasn't actually heard that. There's no indication that that's untrue. But watch the way he looks right here.
Mr. President.
So immediately he looks at somebody else and signals for them to go ahead and talk, just using his body language. He didn't say anything out loud. But by doing that, by a firm and quick glance, by looking at somebody else, that shuts the other person down and says, I'm not answering anything else from you. Just watch this part again in sequence, and you'll see he doesn't actually say anything after that. It's just with a look, he can totally shut down what was asked.
Of his dream and could further drive racial.
Well, I haven't heard that.
Mr. President, you put the Houthis back on the terrorists. How do you see the war in Yemen?
So when I talk about where people look, that's an effective way to shut somebody else down. He immediately looked elsewhere and stared straight ahead at this other journalist. And that effectively said, I have no interest in engaging with you anymore. I'm not going to connect with you anymore on this. I'm moving on.
This next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Good. That's a good one.
So I talked about the nodding earlier, which he's doing right now, very much connected to this, very much feeling as he's getting ready to sign it.
Birthright.
And then he said birthright. And then he looks at everybody in the room. Now, this is a way of connecting with everybody. So making sure that it's not just passively that he's being handed and he's signing it and handing it off. This one is important enough to him that he wants to make sure to look around and connect with everybody, similar to how he holds it up afterward and looks at everybody in the room. That part of it, this must be something that for him he feels is very important to those that supported him, and he wants to make sure that he's acknowledging that this one's about birthright and that it's important to him.
Under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Good. That's a good one. Birthright. That's a big one.
What about that one in the courts? That one is likely to be valid.
Could be. We think we have good grounds, but you could be right. I mean, you'll.
You know, it was interesting. He raised his eyebrows when he said, "You could be right," because he's acknowledging this very well may get challenged in the courts. Watch this right here.
We think we have good grounds, but you could be right. I mean, you'll find out. It's ridiculous. We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright, as you know. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, we'll see. We have very good grounds.
So we'll go ahead and stop here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of the behavior and the body language that we saw while he's signing the executive orders, as well as when he's answering questions about them. The reason I decided to cover this today is I've had a number of people ask me whether or not I think that President Trump is actually authentic in what he talks about. Does he actually believe the things that he says? Does he actually support the various political agendas? And based on everything we saw today, based on the executive orders and the behavior and body language around them, I would say he absolutely does. His behavior was very consistent with someone who was emotionally connected to what they're doing. So based on everything we saw, I do think that he really genuinely does support every single one of these executive orders. And I think that he genuinely feels something about each one. He's not just sort of going through the motions. If there's anything you think I missed, please let me know in the comments below. And if there's anything else you want me to analyze, I'm also interested to hear about that. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.